Hey everybody! Second episode in as many weeks. Woo! I told you. No, not as many weeks. In the same week. I am lying. What I wasn't lying about is the significance of the guest. I teased some of you in our various Discord channels with little hints. Little hints being one sentence. Still counts. I've been wanting to do this episode for a while, but we were waiting for the opportune moment to put this out, because this is a big one. My guest is our CEO, Mark. Say hi, Mark.
Hey, everybody.
Hell to the yes. So Mark's story and everything he's done for the conception of Ember Sword, for the creation of the game, for getting the team together, and even before that, is incredibly fascinating from the glimpses he's given me through our many conversations. And I really, really wanted to share it with you guys, just so you know where Ember Sword came from, why it be like it be, what inspired it. And no person can shed as much light on that process as Mark himself, because Mark is Ember Sword, for lack of a better word. So I really want to just get right into it. So shoot, Mark. We devised a little
indeed.
not schedule, but a list of topics that we're going to cover on this, but it's going to be just a lot of craziness. So I want to start with your background. Anything interesting you want to say about, what led you to being the man you are today?
Oh, wow. I mean, that's
a very nebulous question.
I would say so.
Baby steps. Let's start with.
I'll try and start from the start. Actually, one of the things when I'm doing a lot of these interviews and stuff, actually talking about all this, because not to toot my own horn or anything, but I've done a lot of things. Started quite early. Started traveling early as well, and kind of making companies. So started from the bottom. I think I was like 13 when I made my first company. Back then, on the internet, it was quite easy to actually make things. You didn't really have to verify. You didn't have all these like ID checks, etc. So you can own a bunch of websites and a bunch of URLs. So you can actually have free hosting as a 13-year-old without actually, yeah. So it's quite a different time, like before they actually figured out all these kind of things and added all the safety and stuff. But it was a good time for learning, at least if you were a young guy and you didn't really have any sort of support or something that kind of like you need some sort of adult kind of behind you in order to really be able to realize what you're doing, I'd say. So even when I was 13, I had a website, pretty much just copied someone else's and tried to learn from the code and then build my own sort of like little community. It's called, in Danish, it's called Skibanden, which means sky gang, but a ski gang.
Ominous.
Which, yeah, exactly. But it has nothing to do with either. It's mainly because back then we were using RSC. It's basically a Mirk. It's called MRSC, Mirk. It's basically a chat program. And people had this weird thing of putting SKI behind their nickname. And for some reason, we just made like a channel for it. And then the channel grew into the website I made, which was basically a community where people could post news. They had like user accounts. There was back then you did a lot of what is called like tag walls. So you would like write something. It's like a guest book basically, but an open one. People would write something in. I guess it's like the early version of Twitter, kind of. For those that least remember that. Yeah.
You invented Twitter?
No, I wouldn't say that. I mean, at that time, a lot of guys had guest books and everything. It's like it was the normal thing to have on a website was this tag wall, like guest wall, where people would write like small messengers in to leave for each other. So, I mean, at least in my mind, it kind of feels like that was like maybe the inception of Twitter all the way back somehow. Then someone figured it out, because a lot of these things usually are right in front of us and we can't see them. I mean, take an easy one. Facebook is a community for everybody. But prior to that, we had lots of communities that were closed down or like specifically only for a certain amount of people. So it's kind of funny. But to reel it all the way back, yeah, I was kind of 13. It was my first one, make that website. We used to do like parties all around Denmark. So I think what were we at one point? Maybe 120 people or something. So we'd arranged like these get-togethers around in Copenhagen or over here where I was living in Jylland or Jutland. And then, just kind of hang out and have fun and do all these things and like kind of have a bit of a community. I guess maybe that's also what kind of started me into all this about building communities and the importance of building communities, which is something that I believe that pretty much any project that you're doing, having a community around it is pretty much essential, depending on what it is you're making and where you want to push it to. But again, all the way back, starting with websites. So we're kind of jumping back and forth here again. Like I said, there's a lot of things to tell, especially if we start going into the details about stuff. But I mean, making the websites when young, I started out really, really young on the Texas Instruments I-99. I talk about this a lot. It's all the way back. It's basically some of the computers I believe they used on some of the early ships for like torpedoes and everything. There's actually a funny incident in Denmark on the computer I used back then. Some sort of ship, they had some sort of error and they fired like a torpedo or something in Denmark with this one. I think it's one of the news they actually tried to play down a bit because of what, people's animosity was computers and all this stuff. It was probably something they played in a lot back then. But that's a very, very basic thing about computers. And I think it was either my uncle or my dad that somehow got a hold of it. My uncle got a lot of stuff from the US because he worked all over. He worked in the US. He worked for the US on Greenland. He did like a bunch of things.
Cool.
And he was able to like bring stuff for my dad, or my dad would request stuff through him and he would bring it home. And I believe one of them was this computer, the Texas Instruments I-99. And didn't really know much about it back then. Then he basically gave me the manual and I started reading that. I remember the first game I actually made on it. I was really, really young. I spent the entire day writing, just copying what it said in the manual into the game. And then, you could play it. It's basically two dots just shooting another dot at each other, like a dogfighting game. And it took me a whole day to actually write that game. And then I had like maybe 15 minutes to play it before my parents were like, hey, it's evening. You have to go to bed now. You've been up already too long. That kind of kicked me off, at least on making games on the I-99, I-99, if I can pronounce it correctly. And through that, it kind of grew. My dad always had different computers back then, so I think we went on to the Amiga the Commodore 64. We went on
classic.
to that first. Yes, and then we had we first had the tapes. We had to play the tapes and everything. Then you had the floppy disks later, and we had one of those actually. We went further from that. Then we had the Amiga, and we had like a hard disk for that, which was quite big back then. It was like having a bit of RAM and a bit of hard drive back then was a huge deal. So luckily my father had a friend who he worked for another big company doing all the gaming stuff. I like gaming stuff, so doing all the technology, just like business computers and stuff. So he was kind of our access or our way into this, and kind of where I learned all about it and did all those things. And through that, he got all these like different programs, and back then it's like subscription services. You get all the new stuff to kind of play around with. And I don't know, I kind of fell into it a bit, tried all these different things, all these kind of different games or apps even. I remember my father playing a lot with like printing on that was on the Amiga though. The Amiga was quite good at printing somehow on like t-shirts and stuff, so you could print people's faces. He would print like some of our family members on t-shirts, then share it out and stuff. So I guess that kind of introduced me a little bit to it. And then through the Amiga and the Commodore, which I used a lot, it was mainly my dad, of course, but I learned a lot on them. Also doing mods to get into that quick. I did a few mods back then. That was way back before you even had the internet. So, you had to like call each computer on an ISDN line or like a normal telephone line. So you would be taking up all the nobody could talk.
I was the same way. That I ruined my mom's social life for a year and a half playing Diablo 2 through the modem.
Yeah, exactly. It was terrible back then in terms of like you would take up pretty much everything. I remember playing even way back playing Command & Conquer. The first one, you had to call each other to kind of play multiplayer, but that's jumping a bit forward again. So going all the way back to the Commodore and the Amiga, we're making mods in BASIC and QBasic, which was like multi-user dungeon. It's basically just something where you get a question like you want to go north, east, west, south. They want to pick up things. Then you just it's all text-based. But I kind of got that from playing some of the other text-based games on the computer, and especially when you got further to like the early PC and the Amiga, there was a lot of text-based games in the beginning, like Police Quest.
All the Sierra games, I would assume.
Yes, all the Sierra games, pretty much, like Larry Laffer, etc. Those games all had the initial versions where you actually had to type, and I remember that in the beginning, I actually didn't know what all these different terms actually meant, and my dad would actually translate them to me.
Oh,
And
sweet.
like, yeah, so he'd like say, okay, this means pick something up. This means etc. etc. And actually, before I was in school, like initially, I could understand English pretty good just from playing these games. I
Nice.
remember in Police Quest, that's a really hard game. I don't think I ever completed it, but a friend of mine did, and he kind of taught me a bit about it as well. He was a bit better at English back then than I was. But basically, I spent like a whole evening once just typing in every single command on a scene, like a scene in the game, to try and figure out how to kind of solve it. It would take like a whole evening. But I mean, eventually you kind of pick it up. Of course, it's a lot of work and it's a lot of sitting in front of the computer, but I attributed a lot to, like you said, like being who I am today, because these games when I was young, they taught me a lot of solving things. Like it takes a while to figure something out and how to solve it. Even on the PC, I'd say when I was kind of a little bit younger, of course, or more grown up, um, there was games like Monkey Island and some of these other point and click games, Sam and Max, Full Throttle. What do we have more of those old ones?
You
Grim
actually,
Fandango.
yeah, you got really lucky playing those because those actually have solutions. A lot of the adventure games from that era were made stupidly difficult and obtuse to the point where I'm in awe at the fact that you managed to finish them at such a young age. Because again, most of them just had bullshit solutions like you have to pick up this pie from the windowsill
Yes.
and you need it 30 scenes later. If you throw it away, tough luck, buddy.
Yep.
Can't
Yeah, it
solve it.
really taught. I remember replaying a lot of these games. I think in Monkey Island, there's always this one thing that stands out to me. There's the place where you have to go over this sort of valley, and you have to use a rubber chicken on a bunch of wires, I think, together with something else, so you can kind of skate over it. And it makes pretty much no sense at all. But through like the deduction of trying to figure out like what won't work, what's like left to kind of play with, and just playing through it, you just learn like to use these different things. Like you learn to think out of the box, and I think it's super important because if I'm playing games today, at least, like especially these point and click games, so there's many really, but it is not an adventure game, I would say. I don't really feel that I'm very challenged. Maybe it's because I'm older now, of course, so it takes a lot more to challenge
You've
me.
been around the block,
But
yeah.
yeah, but I still think that they're quite say like they're quite even in or like linear in the way that they solve things. Like nobody really dares taking a chance. Nobody really tries to do something that's different today, like try and be different from the crowd somehow. And it just feels missing. Like all these old games, they had a lot of character, they had a lot of love behind them. There's another great one I'm thinking about right now called Day of the Tentacle. Also one of
Yes.
my all-time favorite games. It's just amazing. Just the fun of it, the comedy, and that's it's just one of the things I really love about gaming. I think like this way of just getting it's like reading a kind of a good book where you can also
Hmm.
be a bit interactive in it because it's just funny and silly and you learn a lot. Meanwhile, I'd say it's not like you're not wasting your time here, depending on of course who you kind of are. But I would say that you're learning to problem solve in a way that's meaningful
Yes.
and yes, I think that games really does that a lot. So of course, jumping further from this, growing a bit up, I mean, I also started doing esport, but that's a bit of a jump, of course. It's first when I was around like 17, 18 that I started doing esports in Counter-Strike. And one of the things I also learned there, of course, was that to problem solve. So in order to play FPS competitively, um, so maybe to jump a bit back here again. When I started playing on the modem. I used to play Quake way back in the beginning. I was kind of lucky that one of the best players in Quake, he also was from the same city as me. I think he was like top 3 in Denmark or something. And he actually taught
Really?
me. He actually taught me to
What a
play.
coincidence.
Yeah. So, well, back then you had a lot of LANs. So,
Hmm.
it had, yeah, so it's a great time if you ask me. It's a lot of community, a lot of meeting people, a lot of going out, playing, having fun. And it's something that I think we miss a little bit today because we're all connected online. But by being connected online, we also lose a bit of that closeness or like, more the personal thing about actually hanging out and playing.
Hmm. Yeah.
And of course, there's a bit of animosity towards that. So some people think that, oh, well, you're just sitting and playing computers. They don't really see it as a social event. And they kind of have this more of a negative view on it, I'd say, which is wrong, of course.
Regrettably, yeah.
Yeah. But I mean, a lot of the FPS scene back then started out with lands, of course. There've been a lot of lands, especially in Denmark, also around the world, of course, with competing. But one of the things after doing learning Quake, and actually the fun thing about that, I play inverted. So, like a pilot.
You absolute
Yes.
monster. You
I've
play
always played
FPSs
inverted.
inverted. That's insane to me.
That's what everybody says. And everybody's like, wow, hi. I know there's like almost nobody left today who plays inverted. Personally, I feel that your reaction time is faster because you have to push up in order to aim down or the other way. And it just feels, I don't know, it feels more reactive. Maybe that's just me because I always played with it. But the only reason I feel that I'm playing with it is because this guy taught it to me. Um, and then, it just stuck with me all the time. But I can play both ways. So I can also play without invert and I can play with invert. It doesn't really, it takes me like a really short while to kind of get used to it. Some games doesn't even allow invert today. So you just have to kind of learn how to go with it.
Oh my god.
Yes.
You're the
Right,
world's
but
most well-rounded human being. I cannot
maybe.
imagine doing this.
I'd say that a lot of the guys from the old school, of course, they would have kind of the same as with me. Even with we're jumping up to when I started playing CS, I started just playing online on like random servers, like a FFA, what's called a free for all.
Mm-hmm.
And basically, I got picked up back then. There's a lot more trust in like being online and being on servers. People didn't have this sort of like mistrust to everybody, and everybody would be faking somehow. People would kind of have a nickname. You would kind of know who that was. It was like a little bit more laid back, a little bit more trustful. Mm-hmm. So I actually got recruited by like basically the best team back then. He asked me to come down, visit them, come play with them and stuff. And I was like, yeah, sure. Why not? I think I was 16 first. I'm not really sure. It's been so long now, but it's around there like 16. And then somehow before we kind of managed to do that intro, the team kind of split up. And actually, I think that the guys who wanted me in first actually split from the team into another one. So the leader who was left there, he recruited me into the team instead. Yeah, I actually ended up in this sort of like repairing the old team with new blood, I guess, which was quite the ride. I'd say that I was really, really green when I got in. Like I probably had not much understanding about tactics and all that stuff like team play. So I learned like a ton there and kind of trying to learn my way through it. It's easy to see that the other guys was usually a lot better than me in that aspect, like the team aspect. I was maybe more of a shooter. Also, at one point, I was more an AVP. AVP is called, and sniper. Mm-hmm. And then I kind of changed over to kind of be an all-rounder or more rifler. And there's a lot of learn to that at least. But I think that in terms of FPS, when you play, it's a lot about, again, problem solving, about making fast decisions. So let's say that, you have a team of people coming at you in this scenario. You have to make a decision if are you going to pull back? Are you going to try and delay them a bit? Can you remember where are your other guys on the map? There's a lot of things that always plays into these decisions. Like, can you remember how many grenades the other guys has thrown? How many grenades did you guys throw? To kind of be able to have this tactical overview of everything. And I don't think I had it back then as much as I got it later. I would say it's kind of, I think I peaked, unfortunately, when there wasn't any tournaments. That is where I played my best CS. Because I remember I got a lot of cheating accusations back then.
Of course, as you do.
But I mean, everybody gets that. Even today, when I'm looking at it, I don't really trust too many people if they're not cheating or not, especially because I think today that it's too easy to cheat. It's too easy to get around things if you know what you're doing. Mm-hmm. If you know technology, you can pretty much skate around anything without getting detected. And there isn't really any sort of anti-cheat that is really, I would say, out there good enough to kind of be combating this on such a top level. But my hope is that with the introduction of AI and all these things, that we will finally start to be able to catch these people either in like pattern recognition or other kind of cool things you can do with AI. But let's discuss it later.
It's a weirdly topic that's very near and dear to my heart. One of my favorite YouTubers does a series on CS:GO Overwatch, where he just watches clips of cheaters and tries to determine whether they're cheating. I'm actually amazed that AI technology hasn't progressed further than it has now, because the cheaters are incredibly obvious with the scripts they're running, with their movements. I would imagine some learning algorithm would have taken advantage of, or Valve
Oh
would have
yeah.
made something to catch them already.
Yes. Yeah, I'm pretty sure the AI is gonna do a lot there, but it's always gonna be a cat and mouse race, of course. That's why you kind of need a lot of good guys. And when I look at what some of these cheating guys are making, especially for CS and other ones, it's quite technologically sound, I'd say. It's like they're thinking in way higher terms and technological terms that even the companies that are making these games, and you really got to be on your toes to kind of be able to catch this and to kind of be ahead of it. And like you said, like pattern recognition, hands drawing. I know a lot of games, even in MMOs, they have locked things like mouse movement, because then you can sort of see if somebody's using a bot, because the mouse is always going around in these specific circles, and with a real human being, it would be more like different.
Yeah.
So yeah, but I mean, again, it's a huge talk. I hate cheaters. I want to catch them. Hopefully, we'll be able to do something, perhaps with the sort of AI we're playing with. But again, that's a long discussion for another time.
Yeah, I wanted to touch upon something so far. You the way you've talked about gaining knowledge, it sounds to me like you always prioritize actual practical experience or learning with your own devices. Yes, learning by doing. And you didn't really talk much about school.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, we can jump a little bit. So meanwhile, while I did all these things, like even esport, even doing the World of Warcraft stuff, I was doing school at the same time. I guess I've kind of been a bit, I don't know, unlucky with the timing or not. So I never really thought much of school. I know that's probably a bad thing to say, but I always felt that I kind of did better on my own. I always felt that I could find better information online than what we're being taught in school. I always thought that school info was kind of slow. It's always behind, especially if you're learning about computer science. I always thought that
yes, yeah,
that is so far behind the curve what you're learning there. It's much like, I think that the best experience I've ever gotten was working on mods, like mods for any sort of game, like MOD. So by doing that and by having a community with a couple 100,000 people and stuff like that, you kind of learn more about all this than you would ever learn in school or like read about all these things. So yeah, learning by doing is definitely it's definitely something that's always been like repeating itself in my life and also in everything I do, even with if we're solving something in games, even for fun. I would say that we're also learning by doing, going into like, oh, what's happening here? What can we do about it? What do we have accessible? All these things, kind of being a bit more tactical and analytical about it, I'd say. I think that a lot of people, when they play, and maybe it's also because when I talk to my friends about playing games, they have a quite different view about it. And I don't really like, they want to play games to relax somehow. So they don't really want to get into like the specifics. They just want to play, have fun, figure it out kind of as they go. But it's in another way as they go where, I don't know, I'm always trying to solve things in a way to get me ahead. Like I want to learn from the best and I want to take what they're doing and I want to incorporate it into something that's mine instead. That's kind of always how I've been going at it with games. So, trying to find some of the good guys to learn from. Of course, if you are the good guys and the game just started, you're kind of setting that notion. But I would say that even if you are, there's always something to learn from others. I think that like in Bright Star, to kind of take an example here, we have people who are insanely experienced, like huge game industry veterans. They're working on a ton of MMORPGs. And then we have people who never worked on an MMORPG, but they played a ton of them and they have the understanding for game stuff. And I think that by combining these experiences, you get the best possible outcome because nobody in like one single fashion is ever going to be right. And you kind of need some of that old and need some of that young in order for things to really, really fully make sense for everybody. And I always had that, like I never had only young people or only older people or only like this specific set of experience. I think in all the gaming teams we always had, there's a quite a big leap between the oldest and the youngest. And I think that's super important in order for everybody to kind of learn from each other.
That is a very, very good perspective, especially when it comes to, I mean, the enterprising mindset that you have. That's, to me, incredibly important in terms of leadership in a company. You have a fantastic perspective on this, and I really actually appreciate it.
Well, I guess I always felt like I was a bit, what do you say, like militaristically, in not a bad way, but it's very like the control
Disciplined,
fashion.
I would say.
Disciplined, yeah, like the military. But I like that. I feel like if we're doing something, we're doing this together, we're doing it now. I don't really care about like everything around it. It doesn't matter when we're doing it together. Like save it for later, or save it for after, or something like that. Now we're doing this, focus on this, and then everything else comes second as soon as we're done.
Yes, that's how things get done. The big trap, especially in companies like ours, where we have a startup mindset, we're trying to build something like really awesome. The dream should never get ahead of the reality of what is accomplishable. And we thankfully so far have been able to like keep things on track and just consistently work on whatever we want to work on. And you're a big part of that. And now I understand why.
Yeah, well, it's not easy either. I mean, it's always a huge struggle, especially if you want to do things your own way. You're always going to have to fight for it. There's always going to be people who think differently, who wants differently, who wants something else, who thinks that if you change this, it's going to be better. If you change that, it's going to be better. And of course, you always need to listen to feedback and to other people. But I think it's important to stick to your guns, stick to your vision, to what you want, despite the negativity, despite what it is. Because usually people don't have all the information, of course. I guess it goes for any project. So the people in the project would know the most about it. But you can't really communicate everything all the time or at once. It's kind of not a game, I'd say, but you really have to structure it well in order for it to be easily digestible by everybody. Sometimes there's time constraints. Sometimes the other things, you just have to do it really. But I would say, stick to what you believe in, stick to what you want in your vision and fight for that. It's not going to be easy. It's going to be a huge struggle. There's going to be a lot of days where you feel like, you really want out. You're probably also going to make a couple of mistakes in a couple of meetings, all that stuff. But I mean, the main thing is just that you learn from it and do better all the time. And, just throw yourself out into it, learn what you can, then do the next one better. I mean, what they say, like, failing your way to success is the right way to go at it, right?
Absolutely,
because
yes.
You have to learn a lot. I mean, I've done a lot of projects and done a bunch of mistakes on some of them, of course, but I also learned from them. But some of the first deals I did with some of my first games, I mean, we learned a ton about contracts. We learned about publishers. We learned about the greediness. We learned about investors wanting this and that and taking first right on money. All these different things that can kind of kill a company that you have to watch out for. But of course, when you're a green guy, you just started a company with a bunch of other guys, that's kind of hard to learn. But again, I learned a lot from that. Without like a lot of these experiences in my past, I wouldn't have been where I am today. I wouldn't be able to know all these things about international business or contracts and all that stuff to kind of be able to fine tune it to what I want to make sure that sometimes, like if you have a vision, you have a dream, you have a project, actually having that down into a document. So it's actually legally a project, it's legally a company, that it can be quite the ride. It can be quite expensive, especially depending on what you want to do. Just thinking about Ember here, I mean, we spent a ton of money on lawyers, on like tax experts, on international business experts and merchants and all that stuff to kind of learn from everybody about this, see where everybody is, learn from everyone else's experiences of how they did their projects, and kind of how that fit in, because every country is a bit different. EU is different, North America is different, Asia is different. There's a lot of things to keep track on, and a lot of things to learn all the time.
Yes, I mean,
yeah, it's quite a big mouthful.
It is. It's hard for me to quantify just how enlightening this is for me, and certainly for everybody listening. Just this is fascinating stuff. But even me, a person on the inside, I am gaining so much perspective from everything you're telling me. It's incredible. I actually want to go back a little bit.
I want to go back
into
the eSport days.
Yes, the eSport days. I know, because again, to add upon that perspective with examples of what you've done, I know you were big in WoW at some point.
Oh yeah. I mean, if we jump forward from the CS playing, we're playing there, going around the world, playing like different events, CPL, what's the other one called? Click Arena in France. So After that, I had a lot of people who actually played CS who also wanted to play WoW. So kind of, I don't know why we somehow all wanted to play WoW, but it was just this big new thing. We actually thought it would be more of a PvP game because we were quite competitive. And we wasn't really into PvE or like raiding and that stuff. But we started playing WoW and then recruited all the old CS guys. We had a lot of old CS guys for anyone who's an old schooler. We had people like Johnny R, the Johnny Rambo. He was like one of the best snipers ever from a team called Mouseboards. And we had like a bunch of these guys were hiding in between. We also had a few other like famous ones from other international teams who came in and just played around us once in a while. So we had like all these competitive people kind of attached to it. And for some reason, all of a sudden we figured out, oh, we're quite fast at defeating these monsters or like encounters in the game. And like all of a sudden there's like, oh, we're the first to do this. And then after that, it just took speed somehow. I would say that we actually it was a good mix of competitive esport people and prior MMORPG players, where we had some guys from EverQuest who were very experienced in defeating encounters and mobs. And one of these guys called Thomas Kung, he was our in-game raid leader, and he was basically the guy who solved these things. He was the guy who also ran a team called Nihilum in EverQuest. I can't really remember, it's so long ago now. But he was our in-game raid leader, and he solved like pretty much all these things. I was never too good in-game at it, like to just come up with all these like different solutions to all this stuff. That was more him. He was really good at that. I was more the outside businessman on taking care of all the managing things or getting people on, anything to do with the business side and all this stuff. And he would take more care of all the in-game things and the kind of leading the team, recruiting people when we had to defeat things. So after we actually defeated things, one of us, other guys, could kind of take over and just run it, kind of get a lot of things. It was kind of leads me into another fun, just in WoW in the beginning, you had like 40 people in the raid. So I think we had 200 people in the team at once. And when you have 200 people and you can only select 40 to go into these encounters, you're going to have a lot of angry people writing to you, yes. Why didn't you pick them? And again, like talking about experiences learned from games, I think that's also one of the things that really hardened me in the beginning, because today, like when I was older, a lot of these events that happen in companies, people getting angry, someone getting fired and throwing around chairs and stuff like that, it never really affected me somehow, because when you had loads of people write to you every day that they hate you and you didn't pick them and you ruined their evening because you didn't pick them, you kind of get used to it, I guess, somehow. And I think that you need this kind of thick skin if you want to be a leader. You need to be able to take all this different criticism. A lot of people, they don't have the same like perspective of it as you. They just want to have fun. They just want to play for an evening. Whereas you're kind of trying to keep everything together, keep everybody happy. So in order to kind of do that, we invented a system. So if you weren't in the actual team that went to defeat a monster, you could go farm other things on the side and earn what was called DKP. Which is dragon kill points. Something you used in the beginning, also in a lot of other RPGs. And by that way, you can farm points that you can then use later in the raids. So in order to get an item in one of these raids, you would use your points that you collected by being an active member of the team or the guild to get these items.
Reward incentives.
Yes, but of course, we had that, but on top of that, we would also divide items to whoever needed the first in order to be able to defeat encounters the most. So if you're like a tank and something dropped for tank, that tank would get it. So it's not just some random guy in the team that got it where it isn't really most useful. So it's like both the maximum impact of what you're getting, but it's also allowing for people to get something, on the side with all the time to spend in it. It's a bit of I wouldn't say, I don't really know if there's like a specific term for it or something, but at least this is what we kind of came up with. And this sort of like mixed in between reward and being a member of it. And I always thought it worked well. At least it worked well for us. I mean, we were number one for 2 years and 3 months.
Oh my God, what?
Yeah, I mean, if you go to the WoW wiki and you look up Nihilum or Insidia, from Terran Mill back then, you can see that I think it was number one for 2 years and 3 months, where we won all events. Like we defeated every encounter in the game. We did all the PvE, like all the PvE events, all the PvP events outside. So any sort of online tournament or offline tournament, we actually won those as well with the team we picked there. So that's quite right. Yeah, and the PvP team was some guys we actually handpicked that we knew from like other ways in the community. And it's quite fun because they were on the different sides. So we played what was called Horde, which is the opposite of the other one, they called Alliance. Alliance is more the humans and guys like... And
the
we
quote-unquote like good guys, according to Blizzard nowadays.
Yeah,
sorry.
That would be propaganda if you take me, or if you ask me.
I'm sorry.
Yes. We all know that Horde is, of course, the good guys in the story. They always will be.
Of course.
Yes. But yeah, and then with WoW, there came a lot of things, no other than of course team, but this whole thing about when we got this world first the first time, there was a ton of hits. I think we got like millions of hits. It was back when WoW had, I think, like 16 million active players or something like that. It's crazy. So by making a website and posting these like kills, we quickly figured out that there was a ton of people joining to see it, and learning from like esport and posting content, we quickly figured out that, hey, this is a way that we can attract a lot of people to the site. Let's get some ads up and all this stuff. And then it just took speed right away. Even had interest from some of the early like esport teams. We joined with Mousebots, and I think we call like Nihilo Mousebots MMO officially at one point at least. And that also kind of helped us a bit evolve on that end. So in terms of esport, I thought it was always semi-accepted, but it was still on the side, I'd say. It wasn't really... I think it wasn't never really accepted on the same way that you would say like an FPS game is as an esport or something like that. It's also something that I hope to like with Ember we're hoping to kind of reinvigorate what is esports for MMOs, and something like we want to call like micro esports, because you don't need to have something where people win like huge amounts of money or something all the time for it to sort of be an esport. If you can just make it competitive and fun and still rewardable, it's still esport. And that's something that fits better into an MMORPG than doing it, the other way. I mean, I don't think watching like a 3-on-3 WoW battle on TV is super exciting. But I think that about a bunch of different games, there's not many of them I think is super exciting to watch on the big screen unless you're kind of a part of it yourself and you kind of understand what's going on. And I think that's one of the main reasons for MMOs as well, which is one of the things that we're thinking about, at least, to kind of how can we structure this. And if you look at our team, like in terms of our advisors, we do have a lot of esport guys on there. So it is something that we're definitely looking to kind of touch more down upon. It's not something we talked a lot about, but it is really a segment within the company, within the division, that we are very highly thinking about, especially for the end game, and especially for those who are interested in PvP.
I want to make note of something. All of that you just described, this sounds like systems that are commonplace nowadays. You did this at the genesis of WoW. You created... am I correct in assuming that everything you've done, most of everything you did, was handled outside of game because those systems just didn't exist at the time, right?
Oh, yeah. I mean, we had to make everything ourselves. I mean, actually, when we started playing WoW, it didn't even have... It had Lua scripting, but it didn't have any add-ons. So we actually made all our add-ons ourselves. Like we had to make... God. We had to make a timer, and it didn't really fit perfectly, but it fit around. So, we had to start a timer ourselves and then run it, and then had to write like a script that sent like a text tell and all this stuff. So yeah, but I mean, that came fast though. Like it didn't take too long until you had a ton of mods kind of helping you a lot. I guess that's kind of also a big difference from the beginning of WoW to the end in terms of how many tools you kind of had to help you along. I mean, I remember at least at one point in WoW, I think that like the whole entire screen was just full up of tools and add-ons and all that stuff.
Yes, I've seen that.
Yeah, it's like very little actual gameplay in there, but somehow it still kind of worked. People still love solving those somehow. So there is this sort of notion about solving these things. It's just about, you have to facilitate it better, I'd say. Like our philosophy of the game is just to simplify everything well, to remove all the silly barriers, to remove all those things that are kind of hated in the game, and just make the core more about having fun. Then, of course, there's the whole monetization aspect and things that value and all that stuff. But like I said in other podcasts, I always thought that things had value in games. I've been a part of talking about WoW again to actually facilitate some of the things we did with Neil and Initiative. We used to facilitate sales. We know a lot of guys who actually he did that, and they would sell some of the items. So because we had access to these new items, because we were the first to defeat them, we could take people into our raids, and they would then pay for getting some of these items, and we would use that money then to kind of finance our website or to finance like a get-together somewhere. So we had a couple of get-togethers with the teams where everybody would meet each other and kind of have fun, and that money actually came from these sales.
That's so nice.
Yeah.
I mean, speaking of the business side of it, tell me what that looked like. How did that evolve?
Oh yeah. I mean, first of all, we just started out, of course, with advertisement money. I remember something that always stood out to me at these spots that all the gold sellers, they of course wanted to give really insane amounts of money. I think you get like 8,000 euros, 10,000 euros, 12,000 euros a month if you had gold ads. So we actually partnered with Mousebots once to do some of our stuff with the team. And I think one of the first things they did was actually to add goal ads on the goddamn site. And I remember writing to them like, no, we don't do this. It's like one of the few things we don't want to do. We don't want to have goal ads on it. We just didn't want to support that aspect of it. I know that a lot of other people do. Maybe the incentive is a bit different today. I don't really know, but at least there's always a segment of it that we never really liked much, and we're always kind of against. At least the community didn't really accept it much anyway. So no matter what, I would say was the right thing about it. So then we got the money in, and then basically we just used that to pay people. That we would have like a segment of people who would get a bit of money every month to kind of make sure that everything was kind of set. And then we have these different teams. We had writers on. Quickly started building like a writing team. Recruited a bunch of guys. A lot of the guys actually that I recruited back then, today they're all working at quite big companies. They're working at Riot. They're working at Blizzard. In quite nice positions. So I would say we picked the right people at least to help run it back then. I'm quite happy about it. I think it was a good learning experience for everyone to kind of be thrust into it. I remember Michael Dell was actually one of our like private sponsors on one of it. Some of the guys they met his like private secretary at I think it was the RPG Con, or it was was Gamescom. I can't remember which one it was in Germany, in Cologne. So, and he thought that everything we did was kind of awesome. I think it was after he saw that back then you didn't have YouTube. Or this YouTube can only have like 1 minute videos, a few minute videos. Yep. So we had to upload all our like these videos of people defeating the monsters and stuff. They had to upload on something called like WoW movies. And way back in the day, I think we had like, before they lost the database, I think we had like 91 million downloads, and that's just downloads and not even views. Which is, yeah, it's quite crazy. I think the official one ended around 60, and then I think they lost the database again or something like that, because a lot of the things from back then are just gone nowadays, which is quite sad. I do think I have something in my email somewhere about it, at least, which is good. But you can still see it today. I mean, a lot of people know it. But it's just before YouTube. It's kind of sad. But yeah, I mean, those downloads alone were just huge. I mean, so we used to put like sponsorship logos in the front or in the back, just try and kind of get it about. He gave us so much. He gave us like a ton of computers, like these XPC computers. 2 versions of them, and then he gave us like I think it was 4 web servers, like huge web servers.
4 servers.
Yeah, something like that. It's just super. And I always thought like Michael Dell was really awesome of him to support us like back then. And he didn't really, or they never claimed anything from us. They never wanted anything from us. They're just happy to kind of be a part of it somehow. That's really awesome. But I mean, you had a lot of guys back then, different kind of more hardware teams kind of giving a bit of money. So some of them get like maybe 2,000 euros a month, 3,000 euros a month, depending on who they are. And then they would just have a logo on T-shirt and everything. And one of the main things that they would also give it to us is because we did all the events for Blizzard, or a lot of them at least, like the Worldwide Invitational in Paris. We did that live TV. We did some event in Paris as well, or I think it was in Paris with Millennium, another like WoW guild back then. Then we've done a bunch of the events at Gamescom in Cologne for Blizzard as well, where we defeat some sort of like high-end monster that the players don't really they haven't really defeated or they haven't really seen like in the game. So if you check the stats often, a lot of these like high-end mobs and games, they usually only been defeated by like maybe 10% of the population. So showing this off to normal gamers, it was always like a big treat for them, I'd say.
And your treat comes in the form of a 2-part episode. That's right. This podcast was such a behemoth that we figured we'd give you 2 episodes that are more palatable. So join us next time when we delve into Ember Sword, Mark's creation of it, his vision of it, and some of his favorite media. Hey you made it to the end. Congratulations! That must mean you like us enough to want more, right? Well, good news! We're all over the internet. Go to embersword.com and subscribe to our newsletter for a chance to play the game early, as well as the latest interesting tidbits on the game and the team. Join our lovely Discord community over at discord.gg/embersword. Follow us on Twitter and Facebook at PlayEmberSword for regular updates on what we're up to. And remember the basics. Drink water, be kind to each other, and spread the word about Ember Sword.